Okay, we're excited to hear another segment. Richard Kaplan, Beyond the Mind's Eye and his focus on mental health. Take it away, Richard.
Thank you. Today was the annual Walk for Alzheimer's and Alzheimer's Research at Eisenhower Park. It was my first time doing it. I always have tried to do it, but I never brought myself to do it. This year I finally said, I'm gonna do it in honor of my mother, who is right there in the photo. My mother died of Alzheimer's on September 1st, 2012. She was born on June 24th, 1926. Her final years of life were probably the happiest that I can recall because of one person that really had the courage to step up among all of my former friends. This female was extraordinary. She not only took time to shower my mother, but to take her out to get her nails done, her hair done. My mother loved opera and loved singing. I remember coming home and hearing them singing in harmony, and it was the most extraordinary thing you'd ever witness. It's hard to imagine that an illness like this is real, but it is very real, and I'm going to enlighten you on it, and when we're done, I'm going to give you resources to call if you or someone you love suffers from it. The National Alzheimer's Association has a website, www.alz.org. Their number is 1-800-272-3900. If you or someone you love is suffering from this, or you're a caregiver and need resource information, this is priceless. This number will connect you to the Long Island chapter where they will help you find whatever it is you need. They have a calendar of events coming up in Riverhead Legal and Financial Conference on September 17th at 8:30 a.m. till noon at the Hotel Indigo, 1830 West Main Street, Riverhead, New York, 11901. They have a Hispanic Symposium on October 9th, 8:30 a.m. till noon at 300 Broad Hollow Road, Lower Level Conference Room A, Melville, New York. And the Alzheimer's Community Forum, which I personally plan on attending, October 23rd, 6:30 to 8 p.m. at the Salvation Army Hempstead Community Center, 65 Atlantic Avenue, Hempstead, New York, 11550. This is in partnership with the Salvation Army and the FCA. Now, if you or someone you love need immediate care, there are walk-in care consultations that take place at both Long Island locations. Or you can call the number that I just gave, 800-272-3900, to schedule an appointment with a dementia specialist. In Melville, September 5th, 10 a.m. till noon, October 4th, noon to 2 p.m., and October 15th, 4 to 6 p.m. This is at 300 Broad Hollow Road, Suite LL 100 in Melville. Also, Riverhead does this September 23rd, 2 to 4 p.m. at 30 West Main Street, Suite 212, Riverhead, New York, 11901. Now, for those not familiar with Alzheimer's, here's the breakdown. Scientists continue to explain the complicated brain changes involved in the origin and progress of Alzheimer's disease. There are multiple scientific studies and clinical trials that showed that loss of the brain function starts years, more than a decade or more, before any significant memory and other cognitive problems can be appreciated. During this preclinical stage, a majority of people appear to be symptom-free for several years. Meanwhile, the troublesome changes are going on in the brain. Gradual damage occurring in the brain of people with Alzheimer's disease starts to show itself in certain early clinical stages and symptoms whose intensity vary greatly from person to person. Signs of early onset Alzheimer's disease begin during the 30s and mid-60s. However, for most persons with Alzheimer's disease, those with the late onset variety, the common symptoms of the disease first appear during their 50s to 60s. When it comes to the early signs of Alzheimer's, memory and cognitive difficulties are typically one of the first signs in 70 to 80% of the affected people. The problems with the thought process and retaining recent information can be the first symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. Medically known as dementia, the development of memory loss are often complex and tend to affect short-term memory. The typical progression of Alzheimer's disease may be broken down with 3, 5, or 7 stages, which I have laid out. The first stage is no impairment. The second stage is very mild cognitive decline. The third stage is a mild cognitive decline, and by the early stages or early onset stage, it's dementia. That's when we start to see a decline in the mental capacity as well as memory. Stage 4 is moderate cognitive decline, and then mid-stage is increased dementia. Stage 5 is moderately severe cognitive decline. Stage 6 is severe cognitive decline. And then late stage is intense dementia. And stage 7 is very severe cognitive decline. Alzheimer's disease is a progressive disease that gradually worsens over a period of 4 to 20 years. On average, however, most people live between 4 to 8 years. In my mother's case, she lived about 4 years. And I will get into why when I finish. Following the diagnosis. The progression of the disease may be different for each individual, but family members and caregivers should familiarize themselves with the typical stages that occur throughout progression. This way they know what to expect and they're not blindsided by any of the sudden changes that occur within the progression of the disease. This is the important aspect to Alzheimer's. Amyloid plaques. Amyloid plaques basically is a protein. It is formed from the breakdown of a larger protein called amyloid precursor protein. In the Alzheimer's brain, abnormal levels of this naturally occurring protein clump together to form plaques that collect between neurons and disrupt cell functions. Key biological processes in the brain. Most neurons have 3 basic parts: a cell body, multiple dendrites, and an axon. The cell body contains the nucleus, which houses the genetic blueprint that directs and regulates the cell's activities. Dendrites are branch-like structures that extend from the cell body and collect information from the neurons. The axon is a cable-like structure at the end of the cell body opposite the dendrites and transmits messages to other neurons. The functions and survival of neurons depend on several key biological features: communication, metabolism, repair, remodeling, and regeneration. Alzheimer's disease disrupts processes vital to neurons and their networks, including communication, metabolism, and repairs. At first, Alzheimer's disease typically destroys neurons and their connections in parts of the brain involved in memory. It later affects areas in the cerebral cortex responsible for language, reasoning, and social behavior. Eventually, many other areas of the brain are damaged. Over time, a person with Alzheimer's gradually loses his or her ability to live and function independently. Ultimately, the disease is fatal. In the case of my mom originally had what we thought might have been a mini stroke. Shortly after that, all the symptoms started to happen. It is not uncommon. In the case of Alzheimer's disease, 2/3 of the people who suffer from Alzheimer's are in fact women. I have more facts up on my Facebook page from the walk that will educate you on dementia, resources, and so on. The most important thing about Alzheimer's is patience. For caregivers, this is not an easy illness. For me, it was a nightmare to watch someone that I loved and cared so very deeply for disintegrate before my eyes. It is a very difficult illness. It is a very painful illness. But the fact is, I do believe within this decade, we will see a cure. The reason I'm so confident is because we know what causes it: amyloid protein. In this case, the technical or chemical term is amyloid 42. This protein is almost parasitical in that it attacks brain cells and literally destroys them, which is why we literally witness the gradual decline of memory from minute to secondary to intense. It will begin with short-term memory, like Howie, for example, reminding me of a segment next week, I will forget automatic. Then it goes to intermediate. Like a couple of years ago, I was engaged to be married, I don't remember that. And then finally long-term, where people that you grew up with, like your mother or father, no longer recognize you. Amyloid attacks without mercy. There are drugs to slow the progression, but we don't have a drug to actually destroy these plaques yet. It is a lot of clinical trials that are going on, and they do look promising. But like I said, they're in clinical trials, and they're not making them public until they know exactly what they are doing as far as these drugs go. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them on our page under my segment. I will write back immediately. And if you need resources of any kind, like I said, I posted the number also on my Facebook page. My email address is xcartmann@yahoo.com. I always look forward to hearing your opinions as well as views regarding this segment, and I look forward to interacting with any of you on topics in the future. Next week, my guest will be AJ or Eyal Kashani of New Jersey, who is a caregiver to an autistic teenage brother of his. He will explain how he interacts and how he has opened his brother's eyes to the world and to the world of social interaction through this illness of autism. I thank you so much for watching, and have a very blessed week. And remember, the key to mental illness is not fearing it, but embracing and understanding it. Thank you, and have a great week.
Okay, Richard Kaplan, thank you for your report on Alzheimer's, and a detailed and great report. And we'll talk more about Alzheimer's and mental illness on future segments. Great job. Thank you.
Thank you.